Pablo Escobar. Imagine becoming one of the world's most wanted criminals, then negotiating your own surrender. Not only that, you get to design the prison you'll live in. It sounds unbelievable, but that's exactly what happened. In the early 1990s, Pablo Escobar, the infamous leader of the Medellin cartel, struck a deal with the Colombian government. He agreed to turn himself in, but only under one condition. He would build his own prison. The prison was called La Catedral. From the outside, it looked heavily fortified. High walls, watchtowers, security fences. But once you stepped inside, it looked more like a private resort. There was a soccer field, a bar, a jacuzzi, beautiful views overlooking the mountains. Escobar's living quarters were anything but a prison cell. He had a large bed, comfortable furniture, entertainment systems, and complete control over who came and went. Friends visited, family visited. Even members of his cartel came and went with little interference. The guards outside? Many were loyal to Escobar, not the government. For Escobar, life barely changed. He wasn't cut off from the outside world. He was still running his criminal empire. Drug shipments continued. Money kept flowing. Orders were still being carried out. The Colombian government had given the world's most powerful drug trafficker exactly what he wanted. Then came 1992. Reports emerged that Escobar had tortured and murdered 2 former associates inside his own prison. For the Colombian government, that was the final straw. Officials decided enough was enough. They announced that Escobar would be transferred to a real military prison. This time, he wouldn't be making the rules. Escobar had no intention of going. On July 21st, 1992, Colombian forces surrounded La Catedral, but when they entered, he was gone. He had escaped through a hidden route built into the mountainside, and once again, he was the most wanted fugitive in Colombia. For the next 16 months, Escobar stayed on the run. A special Colombian police unit known as the Search Block hunted him relentlessly, with support from the United States. Investigators tracked phone calls, followed tips, raided safe houses across Medellin. Several times, he escaped by only minutes. But on December 2nd, 1993, everything changed. Police intercepted a phone call Escobar made to his family. They traced the signal to a middle-class neighborhood in Medellin. Officers moved in. Escobar and his bodyguard tried to escape across the rooftops. Gunfire erupted, and moments later, Pablo Escobar was dead, and he was 44 years old. The Valentine's Day Massacre. When you hear Valentine's Day, you probably think of flowers, chocolate, maybe a nice dinner, but in Chicago, on February 14th, 1929, Valentine's Day became one of the most infamous gangland killings in American history. To understand what happened, you have to understand Chicago in the 1920s. This was the era of prohibition. Alcohol was illegal, but that didn't stop people from drinking. It just made bootlegging worth millions. The city was divided. On the south side, Al Capone controlled one criminal empire. On the north side, his biggest rival, George, ran another. For years, the 2 gangs fought over territory, illegal liquor, gambling, and protection rackets. By the winter of 1929, the rivalry had reached a breaking point. On the morning of February 14th, 7 members of Moran's gang gathered inside a garage on North Clark Street. They were expecting a shipment of stolen whiskey. At least, that's what they had been told. Around 10:30 in the morning, a black Cadillac pulled up outside. It looked like a police car. 4 men stepped out. 2 were wearing Chicago police uniforms. The other 2 wore long coats and business suits. To the gang inside, it looked like a routine police raid. Nothing unusual. So they did what they always did. They lined up against the brick wall, hands in the air. No one resisted. They had no idea they were walking into an execution. Then, everything changed. The fake officers pulled out weapons. The room exploded with gunfire. More than 70 rounds tore through the garage. When the shooting stopped, the gunmen moved closer. They fired additional shotgun blasts into the victims just to make sure no one survived. In less than 10 seconds, 7 men lay dead or dying. The Northside gang had been dealt a devastating blow. The killers weren't finished. They still had to leave. So they staged one final performance. The 2 men in civilian clothes walked out first, with their hands raised. The fake police officers followed behind them, pretending to arrest them. Anyone watching from the street would have thought the police had just broken up a gang meeting. The black Cadillac simply drove away. No panic, no chase. Just another quiet morning in Chicago. When the real police arrived, the scene was horrifying. 7 bodies covered the floor. Ironically, Bugs Moran wasn't among the victims. He had arrived late. Seeing what looked like a police car outside, he turned around before entering the garage. Many believed the massacre had been ordered by Al Capone, but Capone was in Florida that day, and no one was ever convicted for the murders. Bugsy Siegel. Today, Las Vegas is known as the gambling capital of the world, but in the 1940s, it was little more than a desert town. One man believed he could change that. His name was Bugsy Siegel. He was one of America's most feared gangsters. In 1945, A Hollywood nightclub owner named Billy Wilkerson started building a luxury hotel and casino outside Las Vegas. Then, he ran out of money. That's when Siegel stepped in. He offered to finance the project. In exchange, he wanted a major ownership stake. Before long, Siegel had taken complete control. Wilkerson was pushed aside. The project was renamed the Flamingo. Siegel dreamed of creating something America had never seen before. Luxury hotel rooms, palm trees, fine dining, Hollywood celebrities, a casino unlike anything else in the country. But there was one problem. The bills kept getting bigger. Construction costs exploded. Every delay meant more money, and most of that money came from the Mafia. Whenever the investors asked where the cash had gone, Siegel always had another explanation, another promise, another request for more money. Soon, what started as an exciting investment became a financial disaster. Some mob bosses believed he had lost control. Others believed he was stealing from them. Either way, they had heard enough. By the summer of 1947, the Mafia had reached its limit. The Flamingo wasn't making the profits they expected. Millions had already been spent. Someone had to take the blame. And in the Mafia, failure could be a death sentence. June 20th, 1947, Beverly Hills, California. Around 10:45 that night, Siegel was relaxing inside a friend's home, reading the newspaper. Without warning, gunfire shattered the front window. 9 shots were fired into the house. Several bullets struck Siegel, including 2 to the head. He died almost instantly. The gunman disappeared into the night. No witnesses identified the killer, and no one was ever convicted. To this day, the assassination officially remains unsolved. But what happened next was even more revealing. Within hours of Siegel's death, control of the Flamingo had already changed hands. There were no meetings, no public announcements, no struggle for power. The transition happened almost immediately. To many historians, that suggested the decision had already been made long before the trigger was pulled. Joe Masseria. Imagine sitting down for dinner with the one person you trust the most. You eat, you laugh, you talk business. Then, a few minutes later, you're dead. That's exactly what happened to one of the most powerful mafia bosses in America, and his murder changed organized crime forever. By 1931, the American mafia was tearing itself apart. 2 powerful factions were locked in a brutal conflict known as the Castellamarez War. It wasn't just about money, it was about who would control organized crime across the United States. Joe Masseria had ruled for years, but his leadership had created enemies everywhere. Many younger gangsters believed it was time for a new generation to take over. One of them was his own trusted lieutenant, Lucky Luciano. On April 15th, 1931, Masseria met Luciano for dinner at a restaurant in Coney Island, Brooklyn. Everything seemed normal. Meanwhile, outside the restaurant, several gunmen waited for a signal. Among them were men who would later become some of the most powerful names in mafia history, including Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and Bugsy Siegel. They weren't just planning a murder. They were preparing to reshape the mafia itself. Just after 10 p.m., Luciano stood up from the table. He casually excused himself. He said he was going to the restroom. Seconds later, gunmen entered through another door. Masseria was still sitting at the table. He barely had time to react. Gunfire erupted. Multiple bullets struck him in the chest, back, and head. Within moments, the most powerful mafia boss in America was dead. The killers disappeared almost as quickly as they had arrived. A short time later, Luciano returned with the police. He acted shocked, claiming he had been away when the shooting happened. But investigators immediately noticed something strange. There were no signs of a struggle. Nothing suggested Masseria had seen the attack coming. He had remained seated because he trusted the people around him. That trust cost him his life.